Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidil Anbiya wal Mursaleen wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, today we will start from ayah number 89. But before we start with our session, a quick roundup of everything that we have covered so far. Through the last 88 ayahs in Surah Anbiya, we have covered the stories of Ibrahim alayhi salam, Lut alayhi salam, and Nuh alayhi salam. Through these stories was a lesson on how each of these prophets, they dealt with the rejection of their community, relevant to the situation of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam and his companions in Mecca at the time of the revelation of these verses. Then we had the story of Dawood alayhi salam and Sulaiman alayhi salam, which is an example of how to remain committed to La ilaha illallah, how to remain committed to his ubudiyah, his servitude, even during times of abundance and prosperity. Ayyub alayhi salam, Ismail alayhi salam, Idris, and Dhul Kifl alayhi salam's story highlight the virtue of patience. And the last story that we touched upon was the story of Yunus alayhi salam, which reminds us that no matter how dire the circumstances, even if caught in the belly of a fish, there's always a way out, and that is through our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A believer's tie or a believer's relationship, that bond with his creator, with his Rabb, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is never severed, be it good times or be it in times of difficulty. He's always connecting back with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Moving on from ayah 89, we see a brief reference of Zakaria alayhi salam. The surah starts بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم with the mention of Zakaria alayhi salam. وَزَكَرِيَّا إِذْ نَادَى رَبَّهُ. And remember when Zakaria called out his Rabb, Rabbi la tadharni farda, my Rabb. Wadhara yadharu means to leave, do not leave me. Yani Zakaria alayhi salam over here, farda. The literal meaning of farda means alone. And over here it's implying, do not leave me childless, do not leave me without a successor. Why did he ask for a child? So that this child can continue with the mission of Tawheed after him. And the details are all mentioned in Surah Maryam. Now, as he is making this dua, we don't go over those details. We see that he's quick to establish and acknowledge a very profound and important fact. And what is that fact? That by making this dua, or by asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a child, by no means is he implying that this child that he wants to carry on the mission of Tawheed, is he implying that this deen needs him or anyone else in order to carry forth this message? The ultimate custodian of this faith is who? Is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which he acknowledges through his next statement as he says, وَأَنْتَ خَيْرُ الْوَارِثِينَ. Anta over here referring to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you are the best of the successors, of the inheritors. Then what is it that is illustrated through this dua of Zakaria alayhi salam, where we see him asking for a child? This dua, Rabbi la tadharni farda, is simply a manifestation of a human desire to have a child, to teach and mentor that child, so that child can be a means, okay, underline, means to fulfill Allah's will on the face of this earth. What happens next? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds to his dua, فَاسْتَجَبْنَا لَهُ, and we responded to his dua and gifted him. فَاسْتَجَبْنَا, we responded to him. وَوَهَبْنَا لَهُ يَحْيَى, and we gifted him Yahya. وَأَصْلَحْنَا لَهُ زَوْجًا. So he's talking about how he gave him Yahya. He makes a brief mention about his wife. وَأَصْلَحْنَا لَهُ زَوْجًا. أَصْلَحَ يُصْلِحُ means to correct something, to fix something. So over here, if you want to literally translate, it says, and we fixed for him his spouse. What this implies is that we removed that obstacle that made her unable to bear children even in her prime. even in her youth. That is what the word aslaha is implying. What? That we removed that obstacle that made her unable to bear children even in her prime. So through Yahya alayhi salam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually granted them two miracles. One is that the wife of Zakaria alayhi salam, despite her old age, was able to give birth to Yahya alayhi salam, and also she was someone who was barren in her youth, right? Despite that fact, she was able to give birth to Yahya alayhi salam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted them two miracles in that sense. The surah continues and describes this noble family further and says, innahum kanu yusari'una fil khairat. Indeed, they used to, or they continually used to, yusari'una. Sara'a, yusari'u means to race. They used to race in doing good, in doing great things, right? And who are the they? We said this is the family, Zakaria alayhi salam, his wife, and Yahya alayhi salam. What else? وَيَدْعُونَنَا رَغَبًا وَرَحْبًا. And they would call upon us with hope, رَغَبًا, meaning with the hope to attain something good, right? While still remaining mindful of his might and majesty. All right. وَرَحَبًا. Rahaban means a terrible fear, but not the kind of fear that causes someone to run away, but the fear that forces one to remain mindful of the displeasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and make an effort to actually get closer to Him, right? And by striving to do that which is correct and that which is right. Describing them further, this is the third and the final description on this passage of this family. وَكَانُوا لَنَا خَاشِعِينَ. They were in a constant state of humility and submission. Humility and submission. And with that, we conclude the brief mention of Zakaria alayhi salam, taking us to the last story in the surah, which is the brief mention of Maryam alayhi salam and Isa alayhi salam. Inshallah, in the next recording.